The Russia-Ukraine war is reaching a tipping point, and if world leaders aren't careful on how they proceed next, we are looking at a potential escalation that could start World War III. While Ukraine has managed to survive much longer than anyone anticipated, the battle against Russia has now shifted to a war of attrition, with Russian forces holding a significant advantage over Ukraine in terms of equipment, armory, and manpower. If the Ukrainians are going to have any chance at stopping a Russian victory, they need a massive break and something to tip the war in their favor. And it now seems Western governments are looking to approve a new plan that could do just that. US President Joe Biden met with the UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer last week to discuss the possibility of allowing Western-made long-range missiles to be fired deep into Russian territory. While Zelensky is adamant this is what Ukraine needs to win the war, there are many prominent politicians who are speaking out against this dangerous move. The first and most prominent opponent is Olaf Scholz, the Chancellor of Germany, who in typical German fashion very directly stated it's personal on why he refuses to send advanced weapons to Ukraine. Prior to this war, Germany was the powerhouse economy of the European Union and enjoyed a lucrative manufacturing advantage over its European neighbors, as most of Germany's factories were supplied with cheap Russian gas for energy. Of course, all of this came to a crashing halt when Russia's Nord Stream pipeline was destroyed, sending Germany's economy into chaos. Germany is dead last among G7 countries and the entire Eurozone in economic growth, and you can't blame Scholz for immediately backing away from this dangerous idea from the US and UK government. Every leader has to make the best decisions for their own country, and Scholz is simply listening to the majority of German citizens who do not want to see their country send advanced weapons to Ukraine. A poll by Germany's Forza Institute showed only 37% of Germans backed the Taurus deliveries to Kyiv, while 56% opposed such a move. Olaf Scholz has chosen a different path and is now advocating for swift peace in Ukraine, saying it's time to rekindle diplomatic efforts to end the war in Ukraine. Scholz went on to state, "I believe that now is the moment when we also need to discuss how we can get out of this situation of war faster than the current impression is." Scholz has a huge sense of urgency to resolve this conflict, as once again, German manufacturing is heavily dependent on Russian gas. Scholz is now advocating for Russia to attend the next Ukraine Peace Summit in Switzerland and is not afraid to move in the complete opposite direction of the US and UK governments and do whatever he can to end this war. While it's great to see Scholz advocating for swift peace with Russia, not aligning with the US and UK sends a clear signal to the Kremlin that NATO is a divided house and the organization has no clear plans on how they will handle this war in the long term. But on the flip side, Russia is very clear on what long-range missiles being fired into Russia will mean for the future of NATO. Earlier last week, Putin warned Russia will be at war with NATO if leaders lift Ukraine missile restrictions. We are now looking at a defying moment, and when the stakes are this high, you need to make sure you are looking at the most accurate source of news. So let me introduce you to Ground News, the #1 news source I use to educate myself on complex political issues like the war in Ukraine. The story of Putin's red line against NATO drew significant media coverage, with over 187 total news outlets reporting the story. As you can see from the Ground News bias distribution, all sides of the political spectrum are reporting this story. But notice the difference in tone between different media outlets. Business Insider, which leans left, boldly states Putin is threatening disaster over Ukraine's long-range missiles, but his past red lines came to nothing. While the Irish Independent, a right-leaning news source, claims that NATO will be fighting directly with Russia if Kyiv is allowed to use long-range missiles. As you can see, two very different headlines reporting the exact same story, and this is why I use Ground News every day in my work as a geopolitical YouTuber. The world we live in is incredibly complex, and I rely on tools like Ground News to help me grasp how all sides of the political spectrum are reporting the story. Is NATO ready for a direct war with Russia? Or will NATO listen to the wise words of the German Chancellor and instead opt for a diplomatic peace settlement? Maybe Western leaders need to start using apps like Ground News to truly understand how dangerous this situation has become. We are just under 50 days removed from the all-important 2024 US election, and Ground News trending issues page shows me in real time the biggest issues that are trending around the world. Everyone, support Supporting my sponsor supports my work, and you know I only partner with brands that I vet first, so I can highly recommend using Ground News. Simply go to ground.news/Cyrus or scan this QR code. If you subscribe through my link this month, you'll get 40% off unlimited access, which is the exact tool I use to conduct the research I need to run this YouTube channel. But let's take this one step further and reveal to you Ukraine's plan for these long-range missiles. What you are looking at is a map released from the Ukrainian army that details every major Russian airfield. Notice how the majority of Russian airfields are located in close proximity to the Ukrainian border. The Ukrainian army has provided its allies a detailed list of which Russian airfields it will target with these new weapons, and is asking for 3 different types of missiles, covering a range of 330 kilometers, 370 kilometers, and 560 kilometers. If Ukraine is given these advanced weapons, it would be able to attack approximately 60% of Russia's military airspaces, and this is the exact reason Putin has responded so resiliently with his red line warning to the West.
Если это решение будет принято, это будет означать не что иное, как прямое участие стран НАТО, Соединенных Штатов, европейских стран в войне на Украине. Это их прямое участие. И это уже, конечно, существенным образом меняет саму суть, саму природу конфликта. Это будет означать, что страны НАТО, США, европейские страны воюют с Россией. А если это так, то, имея в виду изменение самой сути этого конфликта, мы будем принимать соответствующие решения, исходя из тех угроз, которые нам будут создаваться.
As soon as this video was posted, former U.S. presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy shared his thoughts, asking Secretary Blinken and President Biden to stop this reckless escalation. I say this not as a political partisan, but simply as a citizen of the world. No less than 48 hours after that interview was posted, Russia added a new order to recruit an additional 180,000 troops, which will increase the Russian military to 2.38 million personnel and trail only China in terms of size, with 1.5 million active servicemen. This is now becoming a chain reaction of events that is simply increasing tensions throughout the world. As of Wednesday morning, the Pentagon has deployed missiles and U.S. soldiers to an Alaskan island near Russia in response to increased activity in the area. The United States has now reached a tipping point in our relationship with Russia, and I want to bring in the most credible American voice speaking rationally about this escalation, and that is Columbia University professor Jeffery Sachs, who explains the dangers of American foreign policy.
This is the idea America decides everything. You know what? It's going to get us destroyed if we continue with this arrogance. The point is war or peace. We need people who stand up for peace, who say enough is enough. We don't need nuclear war. We don't need deep strikes against Russia. We don't need further escalation. But we have to have some sense to keep ourselves out of disaster. Ourselves, for our own security. Zelensky should not determine whether we survive or go to a nuclear war, nor should Bibi Netanyahu. We should have U.S. security. We don't want World War III.
To be honest, this is something that has been building up ever since the fall of the Soviet Union in December 1991. The United States has always viewed itself as an exceptional nation, destined to rule the world as the unchallenged sole superpower. Every president since then, starting with Clinton, Bush, Obama, Trump, and Biden, has pursued the neocon agenda of U.S. hegemony, leading the U.S. into perpetual wars of choice, including Serbia, Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Libya, and Ukraine, as well as relentless eastward expansion of NATO, despite a clear US and German promise in 1990 to Soviet President Mikhail Gorbachev that NATO would not move 1 inch eastward. Despite countless foreign policy disasters, the US has never changed its position, and the 2024 NATO declaration, issued just a few months ago in July, continues to push the same neocon agenda from 1991, driving the world closer to nuclear war. The declaration falsely declares that Russia bears sole responsibility for its war of aggression against Ukraine, despite the US provocations that led to the outbreak of the war in 2014. Deep down, the US government government knows that it has played a large role in the escalation of this war, and even today, Joe Biden still will not 100% commit to formally accepting Ukraine into NATO. Don't believe me? Check out the actual transcripts from a Time magazine interview with Joe Biden earlier this year, where Biden clearly stated, "It means we have a relationship with them like we do with other countries, where we supply weapons so they can defend themselves in the future. I am not prepared to support the NATOization of Ukraine." Once again, we see many issues within the NATO organization, as some countries are pushing Ukraine towards NATO membership, but even the president of NATO's most important country, the United States, ruled out Ukraine's membership altogether and contradicted the US government's official stance. The truth is, NATO has no idea what to do with Ukraine, and the likelihood of it one day actually joining the organization remains a long shot at best. But what is clear is the United States' desire to supply more weapons to Ukraine and other conflicts around the world, like Israel's war in Gaza. War is a profitable business, and I've spoken on this issue many times before. The United States is not led by Republicans or Democrats, but by the military-industrial complex. But for the first time in America's history, the new generation is slowly rising up and now speaking out on America's foreign policies that have been a consistent pattern of every US president from Bill Clinton to Joe Biden. This is a fascinating study from the Chicago Council of Global Affairs that asks Americans across many different age groups one simple question: do you think it will be the best for the future of the country if we take an active part in world affairs, or if we stay out of world affairs? Notice every age group has increased their desire for the US government to stay out of world affairs, with Gen Z leading the charge and being the most vocal critics. For the sake of America's security and world peace, the US should immediately abandon the neocon quest for hegemony in favor of diplomacy and peaceful coexistence. The biggest threat to the future of the United States is the United States itself and our addiction to war. Instead of confronting Russia, China, Iran, and several other countries, we must find a way to peacefully coexist on this planet. Everyone, I want to thank you for making it to this point of the video. And again, a huge thank you to Ground News for being a long-time sponsor of my channel and helping me stay informed on the latest news stories from around the world. Make sure you take advantage of Ground News' special promotion and click the link in the description for the best savings on this incredible news platform. As always, I want to thank you for your continued support, and I'll continue to update you on the latest from Russia and Ukraine in future videos. Thank you all for being here today, and I can't wait to see you all in our next video soon.